Welcome to Bedtime Stories with Miss Han. Sleeping Beauty. Long ago, in a land far away, there lived a king and a queen. They were as happy as can be, except they had no children. One day, the queen was bathing when a frog crawled out of the water and crowed, "Within a year, you will give birth to a dear little girl." After their daughter was born, the king and queen hosted a great party. They invited all the fairies of the kingdom to bless their daughter. On the day of the party, as the clock struck 12, the air suddenly filled with sparkling stars, and 12 fairies appeared. The fairies each had a present for the little princess. As the 12th fairy was about to present her gift, an icy wind howled through the room and an evil fairy appeared. "When the child is 16, she will prick her finger on a spindle and drop dead," spat the evil fairy. With that, she clicked her fingers and disappeared. The king and queen were very upset. However, the 12th fairy had yet to present her gift. As she stepped forward, hope rose in their hearts. "I can't undo her spell," she said softly. "Your daughter will break her finger, but she will not die. Instead, she'll sleep until awoken by a kiss." "I won't let it happen," cried the king. "Every spinning wheel in the kingdom must be destroyed," he ordered. Years passed, and people forgot about the curse. The princess grew up to be a beautiful girl with the voice of an angel. One day, whilst walking in the castle's gardens, the princess discovered a tower that she'd never seen before. Inside the tower, she found an old woman with a spinning wheel. Encouraged by the old lady, the princess sat at the wheel and pricked her finger. Suddenly, the princess and everyone in the castle fell into a deep, deep sleep. Even the horses in the stable started to snore. 100 years passed, and many brave princes tried to reach the Sleeping Beauty. However, none could pass the prickly roses that bordered the castle. One day, an especially brave prince did make it past the roses to the princess. He kissed her, and she awoke with the rest of the castle. "I can't believe you're over 100 years old," said the prince. "Will you marry me?" The princess quickly agreed, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Snow White. One freezing winter's day, a beautiful queen was sitting by a window, working on her embroidery, when she pricked her finger and it started to bleed. "If I ever have a daughter," she sighed, "her skin would be as white as snow, her hair as black as the raven's wings, and her lips as red as blood." In time, the queen's wish came true, and she called her daughter Snow White. Tragically, the queen fell ill and died, and Snow White's father remarried. The new queen had a magic mirror and would often ask it, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all?" "Oh, queen, you are the fairest in the land," the mirror would always reply. When Snow White was 7 years old, the mirror's response changed. "Oh, queen, you are a beauty, but Snow White is much fairer than you." The envious queen ordered the huntsman to take Snow White into the forest and kill her. However, the huntsman felt sorry for Snow White and let her run free. Wandering the forest alone, Snow White discovered a little cottage. She knocked on the door, but no one answered. So she lifted the latch and crept inside. Inside, she found a small table, and on the table were 7 small plates of food. She hungrily scoffed all the food, then went upstairs and crawled into bed. That night, the owners of the cottage returned home. "Someone is asleep in my bed," whispered one. Snow White opened her eyes and saw 7 dwarfs beside her. The friendly dwarfs agreed that Snow White would stay with them. In return, she offered to cook their meals and clean their house. But all was not well. The magic mirror revealed that Snow White was still alive. Filled with rage, the queen swore to kill the girl herself. Disguised as a country woman, she fooled Snow White into taking a bite from a poisoned apple. Snow White dropped down to the floor. When the dwarfs returned from their work, they found Snow White on the floor. "Our beautiful Snow White is dead," they wept. The days passed, but Snow White's beauty never faded. The dwarfs laid her in the glass coffin so that people could come and admire her everlasting splendor. One day, the dwarfs found a prince sitting at Snow White's coffin. "May I kiss her?" asked the prince. The dwarfs agreed, and as the prince kissed her, Snow White sat up. Snow White opened her eyes and fell instantly in love with the prince. After hearing the news, the wicked queen ran into the forest and was never seen again. The end. Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, a little girl was given a pretty red cloak by her beloved grandmother. The little girl wore her cloak every day, so people called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, Little Red Riding Hood was on her way to visit her grandmother when she heard someone clear his throat and say, "Hello, little girl, where are you going?" Little Red Riding Hood didn't know that she was talking to a big bad wolf, so she replied, "I'm going to visit my grandmother who lives in the cottage by the stream." The wolf wanted to gobble up Little Red Riding Hood there and then, but he decided to save her for later and eat her grandmother first. He hurried ahead to the grandmother's cottage. When the wolf arrived at the cottage, he found the plump little grandmother laying in bed. His bright eyes flashed and his teeth glistened with moisture. With a snap of his jaws, the wolf ate the old lady. He put on her nightcap and shawl, balanced her glasses on his nose, and climbed into bed. The wolf didn't have to wait long before Little Red Riding Hood knocked at the door. "Come in, dear," he called in a quavering voice. "Grandmother," cried Little Red Riding Hood, "what big furry ears you've got!" "All the better to hear you with, my dear," said the wolf. "Grandmother," cried Little Red Riding Hood, "what big yellow eyes you have!" "All the better to see you with, my dear," replied the wolf. "Grandmother, what enormous teeth you have!" Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed. "All the better to eat you with, my dear," shouted the wolf in his deep wolf voice. The wolf jumped out of bed and Little Red Riding Hood screamed. She hit the wolf with her basket as hard as she could. The wolf fell to the floor. At the very same moment, Little Red Riding Hood's father burst through the door. "What's happened?" he exclaimed. "Where's your grandmother?" As Little Red Riding Hood and her father stared at the wolf, something very strange happened. His big, hairy, round tummy moved. The woodcutter took his knife and very carefully slit open the wolf's tummy. Out popped Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, alive and well. Several hours later, the big bad wolf woke up with a terrible headache and a swollen tummy. "Ouch," he said. "I'll never try to trick another little girl again." Little Red Riding Hood and her family lived happily ever after, safe in the knowledge that the big bad wolf had learned his lesson. The end. Cinderella. Once upon a time, a rich man's wife fell ill and died. His young daughter went every day to her mother's grave. Eventually, her father remarried. His new wife and her two daughters forced the girl to sleep in the exhausted cinders. "Look at Cinderella, princess of the cinders," they shrieked. Cinderella was upset and planted a hazel stick at her mother's grave. Miraculously, over time, the plant grew and formed leaves and flowers. One day, a letter from the prince arrived, inviting all ladies in the kingdom to a ball. It said that after 3 nights, the prince would choose a bride. The first night of the ball arrived, but the stepmother wouldn't allow Cinderella to go. "We're leaving this wretch behind," she hissed. Cinderella knelt down at her hazel tree and begged, "Help me, hazel tree." Suddenly, birds appeared carrying a beautiful dress and gold slippers. When Cinderella arrived at the ball, not even her family recognized her, and the prince was enchanted by her beauty. The next night, the prince was waiting for Cinderella at the ball, and they danced together all night. On the 3rd night, the prince asked for her name, but she refused and fled. In her haste, she left behind a gold slipper. Holding the slipper, the prince said, "I will search the kingdom for the owner of this slipper, for she is the one I will marry." The next day, the royal couch set out, with the slipper placed on a velvet cushion. Eventually, the coach arrived at Cinderella's house. The first sister squeezed and squirmed and crammed her foot into the slipper. However, her foot became so swollen that the slipper flew off her foot. The second sister wrapped her foot in bandages to help it fit the slipper. However, the servant spotted her trick and prepared to leave. Just then, Cinderella appeared at the door wearing only her rags. The servant was sure he'd seen her somewhere before. Cinderella was invited to sit at the stall to try on the slipper. Her foot slid into the slipper perfectly. The servant took Cinderella to the palace, and the prince asked her to marry him. As you may guess, she accepted, and they lived happily ever after. The end.